Hey, good morning, everyone. This is David Brotherton from NIADA, Dealer 20 Groups in Education, and I'm going to speak with you today about some buy here, pay here collection best practices. A little bit about me before we get started. Just for those of you who don't know who I am or what I do, I work with 20 groups, people like your owners, senior managers, things like that, who get together on a regular basis and discuss our businesses. I moderate several of these groups, and my dealers are exclusively involved in the buy here, pay here industry. I work with service departments, finance companies, and with dealerships on a daily basis. I write in industry publications, and you'll often see me speaking at regional and national seminars. Before I got my start with NIADA, I was with JD Byrider for 12 years. And I've done every job in a buy here, pay here dealership except work on a car. I run a shop, but I have no idea how to actually work on a car, so you'll have to not hold that against me. So let's dig in. Because what you're interested in, I hope, is that getting that light bulb to go off, to giving you something that you can immediately put to use in your operation. So I'm starting at a high level with kind of a broad-based look at some of the best things that we need to do as collectors and collection managers in our operations to stay both effective and compliant. So today's environment, look, it's highly competitive. There's absolutely no secret there. It's been competitive for a while. There's been a lot of market forces in play that have made the market in some ways artificially competitive. We're dealing with some of those now. But ultimately, there's more money chasing our borrower than has ever been the case in the past. Our borrower still has plenty of buying power. And this has created some scenarios that as collectors, we kind of have to deal with this. When the customers have multiple financing options, they tend to not want to hold on to the ones they have in the face of adversity. So kind of remember that one, because it's going to be a recurring theme that we go back to more and more throughout this presentation today. In a lot of ways, we've made it easier for people to get a new car than to fix the old car. And while that's a boon to our sales operations, it doesn't do our collections any good. When push comes to shove, the customer's not going to fix the car at the same rate that they did 5 or 10 years ago. And unfortunately, such a competitive environment means that ultimately our buyer is going to do two things. They generally pay when you tell them to, which is a good thing, but they also generally trade or buy another car as soon as someone else tells them they can too. And that unfortunately tends to put our best customer relationships at risk. We're also in an environment that's kind of been in a regulatory flux. A few years ago, we kind of thought the sky was falling with regulatory scrutiny, the CFPB, a lot of very high profile actions against dealers. That's kind of turned from, I would say, it's just as serious. It's just gone away from CFPB and state regulators looking to pick a fight rather than enforcing the rules as they exist and not showing any mercy when someone breaks the rules. And personally, I'm okay with that. The compliance angle for this, we are lenders, we are finance companies, we work with the public, we deal with people's finances. There is a standard for our behavior that we should be expecting to meet, and I don't have a problem with that, and neither should you. But under a increased environment of regulation, especially compared to a decade ago, things are continuing to evolve, and they're adopting much more of a consumer focus and a desire for transparency that we have to recognize it for what it is. So basically, our collections have to be firmly grounded in compliance. They have to be grounded in customer service. No tricks. And in 2020, we've got a credit market, particularly a subprime credit market, which is but isn't really us. As buy here, pay here dealers, we're in a separate special category that I'll explain in just a moment. But your general subprime lending and the credit market as a whole is kind of being artificially propped up right now by a record level of government stimulus to combat unemployment and general economic slowdowns due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have generally benefited from this as it has made it easier for people to pay their bills during tough times. And most dealers nationwide, collections are strong, really, really strong. There are some regional exceptions to that. I'm looking at you, Illinois, but there are some, for the most part, things have gone really, really well, both in sales and in collections over the past, say, 4 months. Now, how much of this strength is due to stimulus and unemployment? We won't actually know until it all goes away. And we've had some time to let this settle out, because here's the thing, collectors, no matter how much we preach and talk to the contrary, we tend to be reactive in our approach to customer situations instead of proactive. It's kind of the nature of what we do. Something has to happen to cause us to get involved. Now, I wish it wasn't that way, but that does seem to be the way things work in a lot of scenarios. And that means you're not going to know there's a problem literally until there's a problem with the customer paying. That means ultimately you're going to see that there were a lot of people who've been paying you over the last 4 months without saying a word, because let's face it, paying their bills is easy when they got extra money. We'll see how they do post that. And more importantly, we're going to see how you as collectors do after the excess money ends and people have to get back to work and they find that maybe the job they had's not there anymore and they're going to have to go looking for another one. So let's dig into some of our best practices. Number one, this starts before you as collectors ever get this deal, and that is underwriting and verification are critical to collection success. Collections must start at the underwriting desk, at the decision making. And we have to verify and document that customers' ability to repay their obligations. The days of throwing everything against the wall, hoping something sticks, let's see what happens. No, that's not consumer friendly. That is not business friendly. It doesn't lead to strong collection practices. There's lots of reasons not to do it that way. We have to verify and document the customer's ability to repay. And unfortunately, that means there will be scenarios where someone really wants to put in the vehicle just can't afford it. Collectors, you all know what happens when we put someone in a vehicle they can't afford. They may pay for it for a time, but they're not going to be able to do it long term. We do our customers a massive disservice by putting people into vehicles when they can't afford the obligation. We also need to verify where they live and where they work. And one of the oldest underwriting rules in finance is no phone, no loan. If I don't have the ability to get in touch with you, then we need to put our deal on hold until those circumstances change. Also, emails, really important to verify the customer's email address because it's the least likely piece of contact information to change. It's easier to change a phone number than it is to change email addresses on 40 or 50 different accounts that are tied to it. It's a major undertaking to change your email address. And most people have free emails through Gmail or Outlook, things of that nature. It's really important to get that customer's email address and verify that they have it. Also, verification, this is not a sales function. One exception to that, I wouldn't have a problem with salespeople verifying references provided it's being done in the right way, but generally, look, it's not a sales function. We need to make sure we know what we're getting into. So someone who doesn't have a vested interest in the sale, but more of an interest in the eventual performance of the contract, in my opinion, ought to be the one who's verifying said contract. It's also a really good idea to have standards in place for your underwriting. I can't tell you what those are because your mileage is going to vary on this. It so depends on where you are, what kind of vehicle you're selling, how you structure your deals, all these things. But ultimately, minimum income requirements and a maximum payment to income qualifier, they just make sense. There is a limit beyond which the customer simply cannot afford any obligation, not just ours. There is a point beyond which the payment doesn't work. And between you and me, principal and interest payments are in the neighborhood of 25% of verifiable net income or less. That's the kind of the sweet spot. 22 to 25% seems to be where it falls, but where that falls is going to depend on you. We also have to be wary these days of attempted fraud. There's a lot of fake income documentation out there. I have seen stacks and stacks and stacks of fake pay stubs. There's websites that for as little as $40 will not only give you a fake pay stub, but they will do the fake employment verification call. I'm not saying that people are necessarily trying to steal a car. The odds are they do a job for cash and they can't verify their income, but they're trying to get a car anyway. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt on this, but it doesn't matter. It's still attempted fraud, and it's something we've got to catch if we want to protect the quality of our portfolio and our collection effort. Number two, there's an old saying in finance that a contract well closed is a contract half collected. Well, a well closed contract, first and foremost, means full disclosure. That customer needs to know what they're getting into. No shortcuts. Don't blast through the contract and the obligations so quickly that the customer really doesn't have a clue what they're getting into. And most importantly, don't rely on the customer to read it. We need to explain the key points of the contract, which is one reason why I'm an advocate for dedicated closing personnel. Either having dedicated trained closers or something like a secure close or something like that to make sure that your customer is getting a consistent message across the board is super important, because it's our job to detail both parties, ours and theirs, rights and obligations as spelled out under the contract. The customer needs to know what default is and what the consequences are for, not paying attention. They need to know if starter GPS or starter interrupt devices are on their vehicles. Do not try and skirt the issues on this. You must disclose if that technology is present. You got to emphasize the importance of on-time payments. Look, a lot of our customer base comes in with poor or non-existent credit. They don't have good habits. But lo and behold, we sell them a car, and the next thing you know, our collection team suddenly expects them to pay perfectly. Yeah, life doesn't work like that. Our customer has never had the opportunity or never felt the need to develop good payment habits. Developing those habits is your job. That's what we're here for today, is to help develop those habits. We should be relying heavily on electronic communications, and that means text, cell phone, email, not social media, but text, cell phone, email, and it needs to be properly authorized and disclosed. The standards for that as a loan servicer, as a finance company, are lower than they are for a sales originator, thank goodness, but they still have to be authorized, and the customer has to have the opportunity to opt out. We also need to sell the customer on the notion that they're buying a vehicle that has thousands and thousands of moving parts, most of which are designed to wear out at some point. So servicing their vehicle is really important. It isn't going to take care of itself, and it's not going to just keep running. If something's going wrong, they need to pick up the phone and contact us. Whether you have a shop or not is irrelevant. You all have a mechanism in place to help customers keep their vehicles running. So you as collectors need to be involved in that and make sure the customer knows to reach out to you. And another great best practice to start the contract off is a welcome call. After the closing, say 2 business days after the closing, you call the customer and welcome them, congratulate them on their purchase, and go through the details. When to contact, how to contact, best method, best time of the day. Make sure they understand when their payments start, when the payment's going to come out of their account, that sort of thing. Make sure they know how to reach you, and then that they know who to contact for service issues if it's a different number. These things are all really, really important, and it all lays the foundation for collecting that first payment. But it's critical that you don't skip any of these steps. Then we get into what is probably the single most important thing you can do beyond making the appropriate underwriting decision, and is selling the customer on the benefits of signing up for recurring electronic payments. Absolutely nothing else you can do as a collector will pay you more dividends than keeping your portfolio, your assigned book of business, active on recurring automatic payments. There is literally nothing better you can do for yourself, your bonus, and your company than this step. Now, I'll tell you a little secret. Signing them up, easy. Almost everyone these days has a bank account or a pay card. They have the ability to sign up for recurring payments. Signing them up is not the hard part. It's keeping them on it that is the challenge. Best performing dealers nationwide consistently have high recurring payment penetration rates. Why the correlation? It's real simple. Monday morning's typically the worst day of the week. You come in with the highest delinquency, the most accounts that were due from Friday and Saturday that haven't paid you yet, and you have to really do a cleanup day on Monday. Not if you have most of your accounts on recurring payments. Those payments that were due, paid. And the accounts that didn't pay, need your full attention. You have fewer accounts that roll from the weekend to the beginning of the new week, and those accounts can get more specialized attention because there's a good chance there's a real problem, as opposed to a account that's going to pay you anyway. They're just going to consistently pay you a couple days late, but still requires your full collection effort. This helps alleviate that, helps control what we call the roll, from the end of the 1 week to the beginning of the next week. Controlling the roll is the key to having good, predictable results at the end of the week, having good, predictable repossession and charge-off rates, and having good and predictable results for the finance company. It's not the only thing, but it's probably the most important step out of the gate to make sure that we get this right and that you as collectors stay on top of this, because it isn't going to do it by itself. When someone has a problem, you need to switch them over to the new account info. You need to take the assumptive close that they're always going to stay on this. But remember, you absolutely positively cannot require that they be on automatic payments. I think it's the Electronic Funds Transfer Act prevents you from stipulating a method of payment. So offer it, sell it, and it's well within your company's rights to refuse to accept cash for payment. As long as they have a fee-free way of paying, that works. Having Autopay built into your collection process, and this isn't just signing people up in the beginning or dealing with problems that come up. This is also used for anchoring promises to pay. For example, hey, I can take a promise for you for next Friday when you get paid, but I'm going to need to have it set up to run on a card, and that's going to be the card that we run going forward. Fair enough? Notice I didn't say it was required. You just implied it. It helps you to refine and define, reinforcing that relationship with the customer. Relationships are everything in collections, as a lot of you are about to find out over the next few months as stimulus and unemployment funds seem to run out or the shift changes, whatever. You're going to have had a relationship. We're going to see how good a job we've actually done the last 4 months in the next 4 months. It allows better collection resource allocation, and it's really important that we all be aware of PCI compliance rules. The way to do this cleanly is to use a third-party payment processor. Customer's card information goes into that. It's not seen again by the collector. The only record you have is a one-time, hey, you're authorizing us to take payments on this card form that you do not keep in the deal jacket. Those have to be kept separate under lock and key with limited access. And the only reason you need to take that's in the event of a chargeback. And that's the last we're going to talk about chargebacks today, because that's literally a course all by itself. Number 4, relationships. And I alluded to this earlier. Our collectors are going to have to want to talk to us. And it's really important that we remember, while the relationship and the situation that we're dealing with today is really important to us, it's never going to be as important to the customer. We are not the only people that they owe money to. We are not the only people calling them. Really important to remember that. It's super important that, sorry about my camera. Look, it's super important to understand that we can't make our customers afraid to talk to us. And if all we ever do is just try and beat our heads against the wall, keep saying the same thing over and over, and never listen to the customer's concerns, guess what? They're not going to talk to us. We aren't the only people calling. We can't just be another bill to that customer. Our customers don't pay their bills that well. How many times have you seen somebody provide proof of residence and it was a disconnect notice for a utility bill? A lot. Our customers don't pay on their own, they don't pay their bills that well. So we can't afford to just be another bill. If we expect superior performance, we have to provide superior service. And you can't make a customer do anything except buy somewhere else. And they can every time. Never assume you're the lender of last resort. Never assume that they're stuck with your vehicle, because they're not. And if you don't document it, didn't happen. Notes, notes, and notes. Extremely important. Quality dialogue documented in the notes. The standard should be that if I look at your account notes, I can see what's going on without asking you, or your owner, or someone who doesn't know the scenario. They should be able to look at the notes and see what's going on. They should be able to determine the reason for delinquency, the history of dialogue with the customer, and the direction that your efforts are taking, all without interrupting your day and asking you what's going on with this account. That's the standard. We need to use compliant communication methods that are convenient to the customer. Electronic communications must be pre-authorized, and I mentioned that earlier, and that's typically, it's more than adequate to have a thorough disclosure as a part of your note set for account maintenance communications like we're talking about here. And this particularly applies to electronic communications, texting, email, things of that nature. It is fine to communicate that way, with a couple of caveats that I'm going to go over here in just a moment, but it must be authorized. Texting, it's 2020, folks. If you're not texting, you aren't trying. You are seriously collecting with one hand tied behind your back. Well over 90% of text messages, I want to say the numbers around, it's either 93 or 96, but well over 90 regardless, of all text messages sent. And by the way, these messages, the numbers sent, it's in the billions daily. Think about how many text messages you send and receive. Well over 90% of those messages are seen within 6 minutes of being sent. That's a win. I can't make the customer respond. Remember, you can't make them do anything, but they saw it. They know you reached out. They saw it. Ignoring a voicemail is easier than ignoring a text. There's something visceral in getting a text message that you have to see what it is. I mean, I do it all the time. I mean, my phone buzzes and I have to look. I've seen many people operate the same way. Email is also very good because these are two numbers that don't tend to change very often. And but an email is not as good as a text, but it's still part of that trifecta, that phone, email, text triangle that really can make your collection efforts the most efficient. I mean, generally, while I'm waiting for the voicemail to pick up, I've already sent the text and the email. Then I leave my voicemail and I move on to the next document and move on to the next account. You got to be careful of third-party disclosure when it comes to electronic communications, because unlike the US mail, you do not have the assumption of privacy, which means you don't dump a bunch of account information into a text before the customer responds. You say, hey, this is David at ABC Finance. Could you please return my call at 555-1212? And that's it. They got the message. They know why you're reaching out. They know they're late. They know they owe you money. They didn't forget. And it allows you to be far more efficient with your time to hit many more accounts. And when they call back, fantastic. You deal with the situation, you work for up-to-date arrangements and move forward. Do not harass the customer. Now, what's harassment? Good question. I don't know the answer. Neither does anybody else. I will tell you that in the normal course of business, working an account, even working an account multiple times in a day, that's not harassment. I generally advocate a minimum of 2 passes through the queue on a daily basis. Monday might be the exception just from the size of the queue, depending on your operation. But focusing on coverage, breadth of coverage. It doesn't mean I'm going to leave multiple messages per number, and I don't advocate that unless there's been communication in the meantime. I mean, if the customer's engaged, great. You verified it's the customer and they want to talk about specifics, go for it. You just don't start the conversation that way. You don't lead with information because there's no guarantee they're the only person that's going to see that text message. Unlike opening someone else's mail, which is still a crime, opening someone's email is not, or seeing somebody else's text isn't. It's rude, it's not a crime. Know the best time to call, and that goes back to the welcome call that we talked about. What's the best number to reach you at? Do you prefer a call, a text, or an email? What's the best time for us to expect to be able to hear back from you? You know, some people work on a production line. Some people work constructions. They work in an environment where they can't really communicate unless it's before or after their shift. Okay, we don't want anybody getting fired, and we don't want to call people at work where we know that such activity is prohibited. We don't want people getting in trouble with their employers. Believe me, you want your customers working. It makes it a lot easier for them to actually pay you. So don't harass your customer. Number 6, this one's really important, and I can't stress this one enough. Identifying and resolving collection issues early in the process. There's 2 big parts to that sentence: identify and resolve. If you do the first one, the second one's a whole lot easier. Problems are best identified and fixed when they are small. Problems are best identified and fixed when they are small. Don't let problems grow, and they grow because of lack of communication. And our customer gets frustrated. I mean, think about it. From our customer's perspective, this is what they want. They want to keep you at arm's length. They want to keep you pushed away until they have the money to pay you. They know they're past due, but you're not the only person they owe, and they're trying to keep their heads above water and want you to work with them. The customer doesn't understand that for us to be able to work with you, they kind of have to talk with us. So we have to ask good questions when we get that customer in front of us. We need to communicate effectively. Deal with the issues now when they're small. It could be as simple as a short-term payment arrangement, a deferment, an extension, or if we let it fester, it could be a bigger problem down the road. But figure out the real problem. So you got to ask good, probing, problem-solving questions. It's about the dialogue you can maintain with that customer. And it's super important that you take that seriously. When you start out these deals from an underwriting, welcome call, first few payments collection standpoint, hey, I assume I got to collect everybody. I assume they're all going to need some help at some point. And you need to treat your customers how you yourselves would like to be treated in a similar situation. It is okay to hold the customer to their word. It is necessary. It is okay that they do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it, and it's okay that you emphasize and enforce that. But there's ways to do it and ways to screw it up. If you attack a customer's pride, they've got nothing left in a lot of cases, and in that scenario, that's going to be a real challenge, because when you've attacked their pride, that's when they tend to throw the keys at you. References. References are not the magic bullet that they used to be. I know a lot of large dealers that have just stopped taking them. Fair Debt Collection Practices Act restricts reference contacts and the use of references. It's a ready-made disaster for third-party disclosure, and your ability to collect on references by statute is limited to locating your customer. Now you ask, why did I bring up FDCPA? Well, because most of the states have a collection law in place that tells you to follow FDCPA. So even if you're in a state that doesn't, or you take the stance that, hey, it doesn't apply to us, we're first-party collectors. Technically true. Many states have a rule in place that requires you to follow it, and following it's more common sense than anything else. Don't disclose to third parties. Don't misrepresent who you are. Don't harass your customer. There's a couple more nuances in there, but those are the big broad brushstrokes. Law is not that complicated. or difficult to follow. There are rampant possibilities for third-party disclosure issues with talking to references. So a good way to middle of the road approach to this is when you're talking to your customer and you say, well, in the event I can't reach you, who would you like me to call first? Who are you okay with you knowing what's your business, what's going on with your life? Oh, you can call my mom. Fantastic. I pull a form out, put the form in front of the customer where they're authorizing a third-party contact on the account. Now I can share information with that account, such as you being past due, such as how much it's going to take to get you current. I can actually talk to your mom, your grandma, your father, whatever, which I could not do under third-party disclosure rules, because if they're not on the contract, I can't talk to them. This is a way to get around those restrictions legally, but it has to be done in advance. You've got to have a signed authorization from the customer. But don't rely on references to save you. For first part, modern GPS is far more effective at locating vehicles than a reference sheet is. And like I said, a lot of dealers don't even require references any longer. Staffing. If you're going to overstaff, this is where you do it. The collections function is the last place you want to be shorthanded. I personally believe that after a certain point in your growth, whatever many collectors you need one more. And I always kept a floater personally, somebody that could cover days off and vacations. They would grow into a queue, and whatever queue became available, they had a good chance of being familiar with a lot of those accounts. Generally, I think the sweet spot is 80 to 100 delinquent accounts on Monday morning per collector. Now, take that with a grain of salt. The more technology you have in place, the more accounts you can have per collector. But generally, that's the most number of delinquent accounts you can properly work in a day. It just is. And that's a big day. That's a busy day just to cover the queue once at 80 to 100, which was the reason I kind of threw that whole Monday maybe an exception to the 2 times through the queue kind of thing. You should expect that every unpromised delinquent account be worked every single day, unless management's told you otherwise. And when would management tell you otherwise? Wrecked vehicles, bankruptcies, things like that. Otherwise, if it doesn't have a promise to pay pending, if we didn't have recent communication, work the account, period. Again, I'm a big advocate of carrying one more collector than you really need, but you have to get to the point where you can do that. I see a brand new dealership, brand new portfolio, just getting started. Nope, everybody's wearing 4 different hats. I totally understand, but eventually you will reach the point where I've got people whose job is collections. And then, oh, I need another one. Well, hire that second one before you actually need them so that they can get used to the job, used to the method, and used to the accounts. And last but absolutely not least with staffing is train, train, train. It can be a challenge to find the right combination of talents and skills and work ethic where they're going to be a good fit in a collections position. It's a challenge. People who are good collectors have sales ability. They have communication ability. They're comfortable with talking to people online, talking to people they don't know on the phone. They're comfortable picking up that phone, reaching out. They're not passive, they're active, but they're not overactive to the point of being abrasive. It's a challenge to hire folks for this position. So when you do find the right combination of talents and skills, train them. Don't just throw them in, expect them to succeed and and watch them fail. No, collections is a challenge, and this is one of the more difficult collections environments you'll ever be in. Train your people. Use outside trainers. Talk to people like me. There's other avenues out there, but train your people. Lay out your expectations. Monitor. Train and retrain. Coach. It's really critical to helping our people succeed. And that segues into management and training overall. Effective collection leadership is walking a balance between staying on top of what everybody's doing and micromanaging. Look, I don't want to micromanage. I want to know what's going on. I'm going to review your work. I'm going to go back and look at notes. I'm going to make notes in the accounts. I'm going to foster communication between you, me, and the customer if necessary. And I'm going to build a culture by which all of our results are up on the wall in front of everyone and easy to see, where there's nothing hidden. I'm going to lead by example. I myself am never going to hesitate to talk to a customer. I am never going to delegate something that I am the best person to handle. That doesn't mean I'm going to handle everything. I'm also going to train my team to make sure they can handle situations so that now I'm not the best person equipped to handle it. I'm going to review account work. I'm going to hold my process to a higher standard. I'm never going to neglect an opportunity to train as an effective leader, which means we're going to have meetings on a regular basis. We're going to have one-on-ones, and one-on-ones will always involve a training topic. Meetings will always involve a training topic. We're going to take advantage of outside training opportunities, and we're going to hold regular informational staff meetings and idea sessions with the staff, because idea flow can't be from the top down all the time. Sometimes it needs to come from the bottom up. And it's amazing what the people who are in the trenches doing the fighting every single day can come up with. I strongly encourage this practice for everybody. Number 10, incentive targets. It's tough to be a good collector if you are not motivated by money. Having incentives in place that balance the desire for individual performance gains with the overall portfolio's performance, really important. So we focus on the things that are controllable, some combination where we look at contractual delinquency, recency, the repossession rate, and the cash collections. And these four keep each other honest. I wouldn't necessarily bonus off recency. I think it's too easy to be manipulated, but I would definitely consider a bonus that takes delinquency, repossession rate, and cash into account so that we are balancing everyone's efforts and keeping everyone focused on the most important items. Remember, the goal is to grow and maintain the portfolio, not the repo lot. Payment assistance devices. I'm a big fan. Modern payment assistance technology is a tremendous collections tool that will drive contact. It will help you identify early the problems that can cause issues, because this tool does help keep the lines of communication open, and it puts the onus of communicating on the customer. It can be an integral part of a good collection process, but not a substitute for it. It's a tool, not a remedy, not a solution in and of itself. It's a tool. There is no substitute for good fundamental collection practices, of which payment assistance device technology is a part. This technology brings a lot of advantages. It gives you the opportunities to talk to your customers more frequently, to identify problems when they're small. There's a lot of advantages here, unless you waste them, of course. So don't be that collector. Don't be the one who just lets the little box on the card do the work for them. No. It's supposed to help you communicate. It's not supposed to take the place of it. If you're still doing field calls, stop. There is far too much downside and risk of third-party disclosure, risk of harm or injury to staff members, of disclosing information to third parties, creating situations that appear to be harassment. This is an area where all of the federal regulators have gone on record agreeing that they don't like field calls. And it significantly increases the chances of confrontation and breach of the peace. Now, I already know half of you hearing this are like, oh, but that's what works the best. I didn't say they didn't work. I said you should stop doing them for regulatory reasons. Those are two very different things. There is a lot of downside to justify the time and expense that goes into field chasing. If you send your own employees out to do it, well, they're out field chasing when they could be on the phone. If you are sending repossession agents out to do it, well, their incentive is to turn field calls into repos. Ultimately, look, we repossess cars because communication stops, not because payment stopped. When the customer stops talking, we have to unfortunately take a stance. And that stance is, well, my customer's no longer an asset. My collateral is. We need to get it back. Number 13, continue to invest in your customers. The goal is to eliminate mechanical repossessions. Okay, it's unrealistic. I get that. Cars break. But it's a worthy goal. It's something you want to work toward. Why do I bring this up? Because we all sell used cars. They break. New cars break too, but we all sell cars that break. Some of them rather predictably. Your customers are going to need help with repairs. Look, if we did our job right, we hit the customer for the most payment they could afford. They're not going to have a lot of extra money in their budget to handle an unexpected repair. They also don't have the credit card that a lot of us can take for granted for emergencies. They're not going to have that ability. They don't have credit cards. When their car breaks, they get frustrated really fast because their lives revolve around the vehicle. Our customers are basically good people. They go to work, they pick up their kids, they live their lives, they do the best they can with what they have, just like everybody else. But your customers are going to need help with unexpected repairs. Don't be surprised, and don't take the as-is approach to this, but more on that in a moment. I strongly recommend that dealers of all sizes and markets have a service agreement that's designed to help the customer get through expensive repairs. You need to have a goodwill repair policy. It's a necessary part of modern buy here, pay here these days. And that may involve a limited amount of service repair financing. That also can really get out of hand because you should be limiting repair receivables to what you will actually collect and then actually collect them. Keep your customer engaged and participating in the repair process, and I mean financially. Don't just give it away. You've got to strike a balance. Accounts that participate financially in their repairs perform better. Established fact. It's best for the portfolio to do this. Here's the scenario that I like to give your owners. You got a customer on the books, vehicle breaks, you tell them too bad, get it fixed. Fixing it's not our problem. So what happens? You have to go pick the car up, right? What's the first thing you do after you pick that car up? I'll go ahead and tell you the answer. You fix it. You fix what was broken in the first place. Of course, now I've got to resell that vehicle, hopefully, and generate a new customer with it. Or I could have just helped the customer who had already proven themselves and had already shown we knew where they lived, where they work, how they behaved, how to reach them. We knew all these things. And we could have just helped them stay in that car and then sold another vehicle to yet the new customer that we were going to develop. Anyway, that's how you keep your portfolio intact. It's called an investment. We have to make ongoing investments in the portfolio if we expect the portfolio to perform at a superior level. And the as-is approach is, and I don't care what your warranty says, I don't care what your buyer's guide says. As is isn't. Our cars are too expensive, cash and deals too high, we have too much money tied up in these things to just take an as is, you broke it, you bought it approach. I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen in. Anybody has any further questions or wants more information, we have a lot of training options here at NIADA. You can reach me at davidb@niada.com. Thank you all for taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you in future sessions.